Get ready for success. Leadership Strategies for Women is a show dedicated to providing practical and valuable strategies for emerging women leaders of today. It's your time to get inspired, motivated, and challenged to achieve your vision for success. And now, here's leadership speaker and coach, Ellie Nieves.
This is the Leadership Strategies for Women podcast, and I'm your host, Ellie Nieves. I'm the founder and president of Leadership Strategies for Women, where I develop seminars and webinars to help high-achieving women show up, speak up, and step up in their careers. To learn more, please visit my website at leadershipstrategiesforwomen.com, or you can follow the Leadership Strategies for Women page on Facebook. Our guest is Bonnie Marcus. Bonnie's extensive business background includes serving as CEO of a ServiceMaster company, Vice President of Sales at Medical Staffing Network, and 2 other national companies in the healthcare and software industries. A popular keynote speaker, Bonnie Marcus is also the author of The Politics of Promotion and the co-author of Lost Leaders in the Pipeline. She's a contributing writer for Forbes and has also been published in HR.com, Business Leader, HR People and Strategy, Daily Worth, and Washington Business Journal. Bonnie has been featured in Inc., Huffington Post, Psychology Today, Fast Company, CIO Magazine, Crain's New York, and more. Bonnie received her bachelor's degree from Connecticut College and a master's in education from NYU. She's a certified executive coach and founder of Women's Success Coaching. Bonnie, welcome to our podcast.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Ellie, and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
Bonnie, I'm excited to have you speaking to our listeners today, and we would love to learn more about your background.
Well, my background. Okay. I grew up on the East Coast. I presently live, very recently just moved to California. So big move for me. I went to school on the East Coast. As you said in your intro, I went to Connecticut College, and when I graduated with a degree in sociology, I was like, what am I going to do with this degree? So I decided to be practical, and I went to NYU to become a teacher. And I got married, actually in graduate school, had children, and then unfortunately got a divorce when my children were really young. And I did teach for a couple of years, but then I was faced with the challenge of, now what? I'm not sure. I've got little kids, whether I want to be teaching little kids, whether I just want a 9-to-5 job where I don't have to bring home homework and all that kind of thing. So I applied for a job as a medical secretary with a large physician practice group, and they told me that I was too qualified, even though I was begging for the job. Please, I need a 9-to-5 job, right? But a couple weeks later, they called me back, and they said, we're doing a joint venture with a management company. We're setting up a cardiac rehab center, and they're looking for somebody to run it. There'll be about 30 physicians in this group. And so I interviewed for that job, and I tell you, Ellie, I had no business background. I barely knew how to manage my checkbook. But somehow I convinced them that I was the right fit to run this big practice. And basically, they taught me the business. They taught me how to run a business. And after about a year and a half, I was managing 11 of these centers up and down the East Coast. And that was my entrance into business, even though I don't have an MBA, I don't have the formal background, but that laid the foundation for then a very successful corporate career.
That is amazing. And I'm sure you still use some of those skills today in your own business.
Oh, absolutely. But what was interesting is when I look back on it, I was able to advocate for myself in that initial interview. and demonstrate to them that even though I didn't have the business background, first of all, I grew up in a medical family. I was very comfortable with physicians, and a lot of people were intimidated. And that I was willing to learn. And my dad had a heart attack when he was very young, at 57, and we changed our whole lifestyle. So I was familiar with the cardiac rehab part of it, and managed to talk my way into that job. But later on, when I was in corporate myself, I recognized that is a big, big challenge for women. I mean, we just don't know how to advocate for ourselves and build credibility for ourselves. So when I started Women's Success Coaching initially, it was with that mission, is to help women learn how to promote themselves in a way that's powerful, that's effective, and that's authentic most of all.
It's wonderful. And you're very accomplished in your career. What are some of the challenges that you faced as you were striving to attain your personal career goals?
Well, I think my greatest challenge was that I had young children, and I had to work, and I had ambition, and trying to balance it all. And I'm sure many of your listeners have that same challenge. It was certainly difficult, and I always felt guilty. I was always trying to be 100% to everybody. Bake the cupcakes for the school party, and be at all the meetings. I had to travel a bit, and so it was difficult. I mean, I think that the toll that it took on me was a lot of stress that I put on myself. Nobody else was putting it on me, and I think that was those were some of the biggest challenges. As an ambitious woman, I was very fortunate that I was in environments that were supportive to ambitious women. I was in healthcare and later healthcare tech, which wasn't so inviting to women, but by then I had really established myself. I had great bosses, mentors, and great role models, and so I think I was able to mitigate some of those early challenges in my career about how to be ambitious and be likable and, reach your goals.
Wonderful. And you wrote a book titled The Politics of Promotion. What inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, well, the full title of that book is The Politics of Promotion, How High-Achieving Women Get Ahead and Stay Ahead. And I learned from my own career that women tend to avoid office politics. Pretty early in my career, I was working for a national healthcare company. I had been there about 8 years, and I had a lot of promotions, one right after another, and I reached the AVP level, and then Ellie, I was kind of stuck, because from AVP you either went to senior VP or CEO. I mean, there was this wide gap. But then the company reorganized, and I got a new boss, and I had an opportunity. There was a VP position open in my territory, and I immediately threw my hat in the ring. And I thought that I was the most qualified. I was the most qualified. But I really, I couldn't stand my boss. He was such a male chauvinist. He was such a bully that I avoided him. And what happened was they brought in a man from outside our territory to take that VP slot, and they offered me a lateral move in a different territory. I was devastated Devastated, but I have to say that it was the greatest lesson I learned in my career, and in writing this book, it was one that I wanted to pass on to women who were also high achieving and ambitious, and that is, you can't just rely on your work. It takes more than great performance to get ahead, and it's such an important message for women that we need to pay attention to what's going on around us. We need to develop, strong relationships with people. We need to know how decisions are being made, and what it takes in our company, as a woman perhaps, to get ahead. So we really need to pay attention to the politics. And when I wrote that book, I really lay out in my toolkit there are 5 tools in that toolkit, how you can become politically savvy without losing your integrity. So it's not only changing your mindset, it's not only the importance of being politically savvy, but how do you do it? So you have ambition. Well, how do you reach your goals without stepping on other people and playing the typical political game?
So how do you define office politics, and why is it that women dislike engaging in it?
Well, it's interesting. So I did a lot of research when I was writing the book, and I asked women, what do you think about office politics? And they would be like, oh my, it's manipulative, it's dirty, it's evil. Some women said it's bad karma, sleazy. All kinds of things like that. So it was clear to me, Ellie, that their mindset was keeping them from being engaged. But office politics is really the workplace dynamics. It has everything to do with the personality of the organization, the culture, the relationships, the rules, the unwritten rules. What it actually goes on. It's not what's put on the company website, like this is what we believe, but what is the reality? And I think that's important. Not what we would like it to be, not what we think it might be because we read some mission statement on the website, but what is it really? What is it like to work here? What does it take to get ahead? What are the relationships you need, et cetera? So it's really all of that.
And I love that you say that, because it really is a necessary skill. And, my background is in actual politics. I used to run political campaigns. So when I entered corporate America, I already had kind of a political mindset. And I think in most people's minds, when you say I have a political mindset, they think negatively, just as you said, the associations that people attach to someone who thinks politically is not a good thing. But in my mind, it's always been about acquiring influence. It's about how do you navigate the culture that you're in? How do you develop relationships? How do you forge partnerships so that you can work towards common and mutual goals together? And that just lays a solid foundation for career success. And it doesn't mean that you're being manipulative. It just means that you're being more mindful of the dynamics around you and the role that you play in that dynamic.
Right, and the major message, I think, is pay attention. For goodness sake, pay attention, because no career is built in a vacuum. And, I had that experience, in my career where I was so blindsided because I just wasn't paying attention. I reached a certain point, and I had all these promotions really fast. And I think in the beginning of your career, what happens is you do get recognized or you do get promoted based on performance. But at a certain point in your career, the technical skills become less important and the relational skills become more important. And we really need to pay attention to what's going on to reach that upper level.
Great advice. So what are some of the key elements of navigating organizational politics, and how can women leverage these elements to get ahead?
Well, so in the book I talk about what we need to pay attention to, and there are 3 major areas. we need to pay attention to the rules, but most importantly, the unwritten rules. So what are the unwritten rules? Well, say you start a new job, you go into the office and you're all excited to start. You show up at 9 and everybody's been there since 7:30. Right? The unwritten rule is you get there an hour and a half before the boss shows up and maybe you leave an hour afterwards. Just a simple kind of example, right? That's an unwritten rule. And it's important to know, well, is that sacred? What happens if I don't comply? I mean, chances are you're not going to be fired, but if you don't comply, but if you do comply, does that put you in a better position? So it's paying attention, certainly, to what the unwritten rules are in your organization. What does it take to get ahead? And what does it take to get ahead as a woman? The next thing to really pay attention to is who has power and influence. Who has power and influence specifically over your career? And it constantly shifts, right? So somebody could be in favor and they have a lot of power one week, and then the next week they're not in favor and they've lost their influence. So this is dynamic. You always need to pay attention to those dynamics and what's going on. But building relationships with the people who have power and influence is very important. And there's a whole chapter in the book that talks about how do you build a strategic network, your own web of influence with those people. And then the third thing to look at is the culture. Really, what is the culture, which may actually be different department by department, but what is the overall culture, and how as a woman do you fit into it? What kind of behavior is accepted, what kind of behavior is not accepted as a woman, right? How do you best position yourself as a woman in that organization? Who are some women leaders who have made it in your organization? Hopefully there are some. And, how did they get ahead? What are the relationships they have? So it's really paying attention to all of that. Is it an innovative culture, open, transparent, or is it very conservative? Because I've had clients who've worked in very conservative organizations, and they're extremely ambitious, and they're constantly hitting their heads against the wall because they can't initiate any change. It takes forever. So is the culture supported? Does it align with your values? And will it support you as an ambitious woman? So those are the kinds of things that help you to navigate, and really specific things to pay attention to so that you know how to position yourself in the organization.
Wonderful. So, Bonnie, what are some of your personal goals and aspirations? What's next for you personally?
Well, that's a great question. I just had a huge move where I left my whole support system and ended up moving to California, actually to be closer to my children. And I'm still kind of settling in, but I am laying the groundwork to write another book. And, it's funny, when you talk about paying attention, I'm definitely a believer that you need to pay attention to the messages that you get from the universe. And lately, when I've spoken at some conferences and I've been out there, and even the people that I meet who've read my first book, and they're like, when are you going to write the second one? When can we anticipate the next book? And so those messages are now like, wow, all these people are saying, maybe it is time for me to begin to put an outline together for that book. And so that's where I am right now.
So how can our listeners get in touch with you or find your book?
Well, my book is on, all all the websites, Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Again, it's The Politics of Promotion, How High-Achieving Women Get Ahead and Stay Ahead, was published by Wiley. And my website is womensuccesscoaching.com. And on the website, there are lots of resources. All my Forbes articles are on there. And so it's easy to get a lot of information, additional information about how to navigate the politics, how to advocate for yourself to get ahead.
Well, Bonnie, thank you so much for taking the time to educate our listeners about the importance of navigating organizational politics. You've given us some very insightful perspectives about getting ahead.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And to all of my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, God bless.